Welcome back to another video, and today we will be doing something exciting because I will be ranking all of my 11 Oden's Eye Cosmetics eyeshadow palettes. Today we're going to be doing something a bit different. We're going to be ranking sort of my palettes from a brand that I have a lot of palettes from. So this is a video that there are a few other brands that I can do this in the future if you want to see. For example, I do have quite a lot of Gloss palettes, and I do have quite decent amount of also Natasha Denona is, for example, another brand, and Pat McGrath are brands that I could also do this video. But today we're going to my Oden's Eye palettes, and Oden's Eye is a Swedish indie brand and they are one of my favorite indie brands. So always when Oden's Eye announces a new product, it gets me excited, it gets me very interested what we are getting this time. And I do think that considering now that the brand has been around for quite some time, and they do actually also have other products than just eyeshadow palettes. They do have cheek products and they do have some lip products, but the eyeshadow palettes are still definitely something that I think the brand gets most of most people interested from. But let's get to the ranking itself, and let's start from the bottom. So we're gonna go from bottom to the top, and I have arranged all the palettes neatly in front of me and they have been numbered. But first one, so at spot 11 we have this one. So this is the Saga of Freja, and now I have to see, this is the Ember Tears palette, and I'm gonna be opening this and showing how this looks like. So why this ranks the lowest of them all? This is already starting to be one of their older palettes, so that's the first thing, and that's starting to show, I think, particularly at this point with the formula. It's already, I think, over a couple of years when the Saga of Freja collection came out with. The second reason why this ranks at the bottom is the color story. So unfortunately with this one you don't get a lot of depth with it, and even within the Oden's Eye collection, but even with my palettes in general, this unfortunately doesn't offer anything unique. I have this sort of these shades and colors quite many times in my collection, and because there's also a lack of depth in this one, I just feel that the looks are quite lackluster that I do come out with this one. So I'd say that because of those reasons, this one, unfortunately, even though this is sort of like, I'd say I get most use out of this during the springtime, because this is quite sort of like light looks that you get out of this one, but it's not versatile, and because this is already like the formula is starting to show its age, that's unfortunately why this ranks as the last one of the bunch. So next to one are probably palettes that if you, for example, saw the palette rankings that I did from my indie palettes from the 2023, you aren't surprised why these are here. So at the spot number 10 we have this one. So this is the Reindeer palette, and this is their second holiday palette. So they came out with 2 holiday palettes this last Christmas, and this was the other one of them. And I already discussed this quite a lot of the indie review, like the indie palette ranking that I did last year from the palettes that I got during the 2023, that the formula of this, it's not the same formula, for example, that has been on the other palettes that Oden's Eye came out with last year. And generally, like, I have found that when I watched a lot of YouTubers review these, that I don't know, is it either that those who got this in PR, they got a batch that had a better formula, or was it that the influencers who are affiliated with the brand didn't want to sort of give these a negative review. So a lot of like influencers I saw were making justifications for it. They were saying that, oh, it's such a great thing because on previous year they came out with these very sort of bright holiday palettes that had very sort of punchy colors, so it's good that they came out with something muted. And I can understand that pastel palettes, because these and the second holiday palette, they are pastel palettes. However, I have pastel shades from Cosmic Brushes. I even have the Natasha Denona pastel palette. I don't have to like build those to get the, like, for me a good pastel shade, it should still show up. And so the issue with these ones is that the shades just don't show up, and there was the similar issue also with the mid-tone shades, which was especially disappointing with this one. The other holiday palette, which will rank above this one, I didn't have such issue with the sort of mid-tone shades, but even with this one, even with the mid-tone shades, for example, the pink one up here and then this sort of baby blue in here, I had the issue that even I had to build them quite a lot to get them to show up. And it's an issue that I don't have with the similar palettes that have came out on the same year as these ones. Also something that I critique a lot was that shimmer shades, they lack base to them. So, and that's also something that I haven't been used to with Oden's eye. Usually their shimmer shades, they're very opaque, they're very punchy. They usually have included like 1 or 2 topper shades, but mostly the shimmers are opaque and show as they show in the pan. With this one, just like with the next one I will show, was that a lot of the shimmers, for example, this turquoise here, this sort of metal purple here, there's this, even this brown here, I really had to layer them to get them to show up in the same opaqueness and brand in the pan. But yeah, I don't know what happened with this. It could be that people have gotten different batches of these palettes, so some of the palette formulation of the batches were successful and some were unsuccessful, but this wasn't the Oden's eye quality that I have come to know and love from the brand. So, as I discussed already previously, this is the second holiday palette from 2023, and this ranks above the previous one only because with this one I didn't have so many issues with the sort of mid-tone shades. So with this one, this has the same issue with the pastel shades as with the Reindeer one, so they just, you have to really work quite hard for them to show up, and that's not an excuse for pastel shades, because a good pastel shade, as I said, I have other pastels from other brands that they do work and you don't have to work with them so much. And similarly with the shimmers, just like with the Reindeer one, this brown, for example, here is something that you really have to build quite a lot, and this purple also, that there just seems to be a lack of color base to them, even though they look very opaque in the pan. But yeah, nothing to more say about this. There's no dream one. This was a bit better than the Reindeer, but there is a reason why this ranks so lowly within the Oden's eye palettes that I do own. So at number, I'm gonna have to now see, we're at the 8th. So palettes from here on, there isn't, I think, anymore, I would say, quality issues to them. So at the bottom 3, there were sort of palettes that either there was something wrong with the quality of them, or they just for a reason or another, there, for example, there wasn't enough contrast or the palette wasn't versatile enough. But all the palettes from here on are generally very good, and they are, for example, palettes that if I would do a palette declutter, I would immediately go that no, those are gonna stay in my collection. I don't want to get rid of them because I do like them and their quality of them is very, very good, and there's versatility within the palettes. But at spot number 8 is this one. So this is the Älva palette, and this is one of their, like, this is no longer available, and this is the one of sort of original OG palettes that made them very popular on YouTube. And this has an older formula, so if you have any of the like palettes, for example, from this from 2023 or 2022, there is like clear, like I'm gonna show, I think it's quite obvious perhaps with the shimmer shades. So there is the sparkles, these do go quite well to the eye. I'm actually gonna see if I'll be able to hand swatch. So yeah, so as you can see, the shimmers, they are quite nice, but they aren't, I would say that they aren't as dimensional, for example, like there were sort of newer shades, that the shimmers that they have in their sort of newer palettes. They certainly didn't have, like, now they have a habit that they do include at least one multichrome per palette that they come out with. So this one, for example, there were like few duochromish shades, but other than that, they were like still quite basic shimmers. However, what I do like about this is that there is quite a lot of, like, you do get quite a lot of versatility in this. There is like enough here to build depth to your looks, and there's sort of fun pop of like this lilac here, then there are some yellow shades here. So there were some fun things that you could do with this one. My hope maybe for the year 2024 is that they would redo this one, so because I would really like this sort of pink toned romantic palette from the brand, so I hope that they would like this sort of do like a redo this, like over, not maybe call it an Älva palette, maybe call it something else, but this sort of rethink this sort of romantic traditional pink palette, because I do know that these are generally quite popular with the makeup consumers. But with this one, like, it has an older formula and it shows when you use especially the older palettes, but it is still very beautiful, and I do like this quite a lot in terms of the color story. Next, so now on spot number 7, there is a palette that would rank a lot higher, however it has a color story that's just not my primary preference. So this is the Little Ghost palette. So this is the palette from the second collaboration that Angelica Nyqvist came out with Oden's Eye during the Halloween time. And I already mentioned this, I think it was in my sort of makeup round of reviews that I occasionally do, in which I also gave a review about this palette. So Halloween is not a celebration that's celebrated in the country I'm in. We do get some of the like Halloween stuff in our stores, but no one goes trick-or-treating or anything like that. So the sort of theme of this is already something that's not something close to my heart. However, if we purely look at this from the color story perspective, I did give this credit for that. I do think that it is still quite something unique with an Oden's Eye's palettes, because this sort of very heavily bluish purple palette, they haven't done a lot of these. I think the Solmone 2 that I decluttered because it had because that had like more of the tones that I didn't like, and I actually replaced that palette with this one because these blues and purples, why they aren't still my primary colors, because this also had this sort of pink and reddish tones. I got this because I know that I will still be using this much more than the Solomon palette that I did get rid of. But because I do have to base this on the ranking in terms of quality, this has like nothing wrong with it. The only like shade is a bit difficult shade is this dot shade up here. So this is the Little Ghost shade and it's quite stiff to work with. But this is one of the palettes where I went like thinking that this and the holiday palettes, there isn't a lot of time in between them, and the quality of this compared to the holiday palettes is like night and day. That this is just like the very good basic Oden's Eye quality that I like. The shimmers, they have good base to them. There's a multichrome here. The mattes all work and build up beautifully. And then we have the holiday palettes, and I'm like thinking that what went wrong with the holiday ones. But this one, just because the color story is at number 7, but in terms of quality, this is very, very good. And I'd say that the looks that I have created with this one, they are very sort of, they are unique in their own way. And there is like something quite interesting in this, because there is the sort of neon yellow up here, but there's also something you can tone down the look. So this sort of more muted blue here, this even sort of wine colored dark purple here, and even this more sort of like muted dark red color here. So even though this has this sort of quite bright bluish purple colors, there's also what I like about this one, that there are colors you can sort of tone down the looks with if you don't like working with those kind of colors. On spot number 6 we have another sort of an oldie but a goodie. So this is the Saga of Freja, and this is the this had a bit of a funny name thing. So this is the Saga of Freja palette, but did this have a separate name to it? No, this is like the sort of double-sided. So this has 2 sides, so it has the more sort of romantic vibes over here, and then we have this sort of an neutral side with a pop of green over here. And why this sort of ranks where it does is that there is like, you get quite a lot of versatility in this one, obviously because it's a 2-sided palette. So we have this sort of, I like to keep working within each side. So if I want a more romantic look, then I just keep within this one. And if I want something maybe a bit of a more neutral with a pop of green or orange to them, then I work with this one. But you would have the option of sort of combining 2 sides if you would want to. With this one, what puts it more down, this used to be one of my favorite Oden's Eye palettes, but because the Saga of Freja collection, like I said with the first one, was that these are getting a bit old, and with these ones you are getting to now see that the formula is also perhaps not aging as well as it should. I still do like the color story and all of the shades in this one, but for example the shimmer shades, what they put in these compared to what they have put in the new ones. In the newer ones the shimmer shades are much more smoother, they're much more easier to work with. These ones, the shimmers, while they were very beautiful and dimensional, they were a bit chunkier and you did have to do a bit more finishing to get them to work. But yeah, nothing else to say to this and as to why it ranked sort of where it did. On the 5th spot, there's a palette that I do think that is still quite unique within the Oden's Eye line as a whole, considering now all the palettes that they have come out with to this day. And this is the Saga of Freja, and this is the Cat's Breath palette, yes. So this had the cute cat in the front here with the Freja, and then there is the color story. And this is probably going to be a palette that the Saga of Freja palettes, as I have now mentioned many times, these are getting quite old. I most likely will have to declutter these during this year, because while the formula is just that you are starting to see it age, and I'm getting a bit worried with the shimmers at some point that they might just not work anymore. But this is something that's gonna be quite, for me, too hard to get rid of, because the color story, this, I don't have this in any other palette, and that's saying quite a lot of with someone who has a large collection. But this sort of combination of oranges and mint greens and then this sort of dark green with a bit of neutral, I don't have this in any other palette, and I do think that this was one of the most exciting color stories of the year when this palette came out with, and this is something that is still quite unique. Like, I'm trying to think that from palettes that in indie palettes or even in mainstream palettes that have come out after this, like, I'm having hard time trying to come up with like alternative palettes for this one. So when day of this comes, when I have to throw this away, I'm gonna be very sad, but this is purely because of the color story and what kind of looks I can create with this one. That's the reason why this still ranks so highly, even though the formula is getting to be a bit old and the formulation as such with the brands have gotten better after this. But it's just that the color story of this one, again, I do hope that maybe they could, just like with the original Älva palette, maybe with this one they could maybe come out with a new palette that would have something similar with this one. But it would be upgraded formula and maybe just something putting a new twist on this color story, because I think that they really blew the socks off with this one. We are getting to the top 4. So on top 4, the Oden's Eye palette that ranked as one of the... This was the highest ranking Oden's Eye palette amongst the Oden's Eye palettes when I ranked my indie palettes as a whole last year. So this is the Jewels and Gem palette. So they came out with a jewels and sort of jewel themed collection on the summer, and then there was the green themed one that I didn't get, Stone and Rocks, and then there was the Jewels and Gem. And this is like, I think this palette again reminded me just why I like the brand. The color story is something a bit unique to my collection. It's sort of neutral, but there's sort of blue and purple, but it's all very muted. There's a bit of mauves and a bit of pinks there. The shimmers in this are very beautiful. There is actually one multichrome here. I think it's the bottom one here. There's a multichrome here, but also the other shimmers, they do have a bit of shift to them. There's a bit dimension to them, and this is, I think, one of my, there's a reason why this ranks so highly, and I will give this credit for is that this is one of the more wearable Oden's Eye palettes. So with this one, if I do need a more sort of wearable neutral look, I can get that, but then I can also amp up the look by adding one of these shimmers or using like one of these more sort of, I'd say use colorful now loosely, because obviously like blue and purple or turquoise down here, these are very colorful, but because they are muted, they are quite easy to mix in. And I do believe that quite a lot of the fans had been asking for the brand for some time to come out with something a bit more maybe neutral, and I do think that the brand executed this very well, and the formula in this, again, nothing to complain about. And again, when comparing this and the holiday palettes that came out last year, I just wonder what happened, because with this one, with the mid-tone shades, with the light pastel shade up here, and with dark shades, no issues. They build very well, and all the shimmers have very good base to them. And yeah, this is, I think, this was a very good launch from them, and I do think that they could maybe do another sort of twist on a neutral palette maybe this year, and maybe try it, maybe doing it too, because this was still quite, I'd say, mauve purple leaning. Then maybe see if they could do the sort of more traditional brownish neutral palette in a new way, because this certainly did get me also excited that Oden's Eye can do a bit more neutral palette and still make it quite exciting. Number 3, if you have been listening to sort of my any of how when I talk about what are my sort of all-time favorite palettes, so the next 3 shouldn't be a surprise. So on spot number 3 we have this one. So this is the Merry Christmas one, and this was their holiday palettes from two years ago, and these were the ones that did have the good formula in them. And this, and I have always said that this one and the 2 other palettes that are above this, they are like my all-time favorites for a reason. There was something very magical about like the Oden's Eye matte quality. When it's good, but with this holiday palette, just like with the Merry Christmas one, it was very buttery. Even though these are the sort of very bright punchy colors, they were still easy to work with. The shimmers in these were just like they still make my mouth water. And only reason why this ranks third and sort of below the two others is that with this one, and I mentioned this when I was showing sort of my favorite Christmas palettes, is that with this one I do have some trouble using this as a cohesive palette. I did make an attempt. I made an Instagram reel and a YouTube short where I did combine the red and the green. I'm not sure how successful that look was it, but I did try. But usually how I use this, that I either stick on the green side or then I stick on the red orangey side. So with this one there, I do have a bit of an issue, even though usually I'm quite good at combining different kind of colors. But with this one, because there is quite a lot of stark contrast between red and a green, I do tend to stick on either side or not, and not use these as one cohesive palette. But still very beautiful formula, and this is one of those like rare formulations where I'm thinking that I really wish that they would try to bring it back to their like other palettes. And then on spot number 2, and this is the Christmas Eve palette, and this is one of the like few. This is probably, if I would have to say that, pick the blue palette in your collection that you actually like really generally love and you don't have to like make an effort to use them, then this would be it. And why I can work with this is that their colors are, while they're blues, they are muted. And again, this had the same very sort of special kind of formula that the Merry Christmas palette had. But there were some like shades, the sort of mustardy yellowy shades here were something that I could also like do a bit more neutral look. And some of the most beautiful cool toned looks that I have created have come out with this one. The shimmers in this are all very like, they are very sort of magical, and there's just a dimension to them that I don't think that like, even like I said, most of the Oden side palettes I do like them, and there's something very special about them, but with this one there is just something like extra to it. And why this sort of ranks above the Merry Christmas one is that this is one of those palettes that did surprise me, because I initially went like that, oh, I'm gonna like the Merry Christmas one much more because it has like reds and pinks, but actually I do prefer this one much more, because with this one I am able to create cohesive looks and I can combine like any of the shades together, and I don't feel like I have to really work for it, unlike with the Merry Christmas one. But yes, I like, if you manage to get these, like, because they did restock also the sort of original like holiday palettes, aside from the new holiday palettes, but if you manage to get these sort of the original holiday palettes that came out 2 years ago, then I would like recommend using them and like letting out your creativity, because the formula in these ones, you just can't beat it. Drum rolls please, we're getting to the number 1 palette, and this is probably not gonna surprise. So unlike the Little Ghost one, which perhaps did suffer from the color story perspective of it, however, the first Angelica Nyqvist and Oden side collab, the Hela palette, is my all-time favorite Oden side palettes that the brand has ever come out with so far. I will say about the formulation, I will hold my opinion that the holiday palettes from 2 years ago, they did have because I do believe that this came out on the spring, on the same spring, so 2022 I think was when this came out on the springtime, and then the holiday palettes came out at the end of that year. So that is why probably the holiday palettes do have the like even like better, even more upgraded formula. But even though the formula is like an hinge better with the holiday palettes, this is ranking number 1 because the color story of this is like something that is very appealing to me. So I think this is one of those smart palettes that it did greens, but it did them in a way that wasn't sort of daunting. So there weren't those like very bright greens that the Merry Christmas palette has, but there is actually quite a lot of like muted, almost this mustard type of greens. There's a bit of yellow here. Then we have this sort of very like pink row here, which is, if you're new here, hi, I like my makeup hedgehog and I do like my pink eyeshadow. So there's the sort of pink row here, there's a bit of a neutral brown there, and then there's this like dark row down here, which I was initially thinking that how I'm gonna like that, because I'm not a fan of super dark eyeshadow, but actually I was like so positively surprised how well and how much versatility actually this dark row adds to all the other shades. And I think the color stories, they have come out with, there was this more sort of green leaning palette because they did the influencer collab with 3 influencers in 2023, and it's Amanda. Amanda was the one who got the sort of made the smaller palette, so the 3 influencers, they made that, I think those were 8 or 10 pans, so it was smaller than this one, and it had sort of greens. However, those greens were quite like muted greens, but they have like, this isn't like the, like they have then done green palettes after that, after like this one, but this is just in terms of like, I think how Angelica like combined the colors and how she thought out of this. It's, I think, very impressive for me, and this is a palette that I go back to like every spring and summertime, because I do think that the looks that these, especially during the springtime, you can create with these ones, they are like, I have gotten quite a lot of compliments when I wear this, and there is like, so you wouldn't think that it has the amount of versatility when you initially look at this and you think that, oh, that's gonna be just quite green, but actually when you really start using this and playing around with the colors, you get quite a lot of, there's quite a lot of variety in this one. So yeah, but that was my sort of number 1 pick, and those were sort of my all of the Oden's palettes that I currently have in my collection. What did you think about my choices? What would you have ranked differently? Or for example, the palettes that I don't have in my collection, are there any palettes on those that are your favorites? And if you always, like in these videos, if you disagree with some of my choices, that's okay, just be kind about it in the comments, because it is in the end of the day only makeup, and it's great that if we have different opinions about it, because makeup is about individual expression. But anyway, if you like this video, then I hope you will press the like button, subscribe to the channel, and ring the bell button if you want to get notifications. Also, you will be able to find me as Makeup Hedgehog on Instagram. I hope I will be seeing you in another video soon. I hope you have a good day. Bye bye!